The Eyes of an Alien by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Transplant. It had been 6 weeks since James Horner's cornea transplant. The world had returned to him in fragments, light, color, motion, but clarity remained elusive. His vision blurred unpredictably, and he still relied on ride services to get to work. The doctor had warned him. Full recovery could take months, maybe a year. James didn't mind the wait. What unsettled him was the silence surrounding the donor. The paperwork listed the source as classified under International Medical Exchange, which struck him as odd. He'd asked the surgical coordinator about it once, and she'd offered a tight-lipped smile. "Some donors come from experimental programs," she said. "You were lucky." These were exceptional. Exceptional. The word echoed in his mind as he stared out the window of his rideshare, watching the city smear past in streaks of neon and shadow. He'd always assumed the donor was human. But lately, he wasn't so sure. Chapter 2. Blurred Lines. James Horner sat at his desk, squinting at lines of code that refused to stay still. The screen shimmered, then snapped back into focus. He blinked hard. It was happening more often now. Images warping, faces shifting, reality bending at the edges. He rubbed his temples and leaned back. His co-workers moved through the open-plan office like ghosts behind frosted glass. He could make out their shapes, but something was off. Their movements were too fluid, too synchronized, like actors in a play he hadn't auditioned for. That night, James dug through his medical records. He hadn't looked at them since the surgery. Most of it was standard, procedure notes, recovery timelines, post-op instructions. But one document stood out, an authorization form stamped with a logo he didn't recognize. It wasn't from the hospital. It was from something called the Interstellar Biological Exchange Initiative. He stared at the name. It sounded like a joke. But the form was real, signed and dated, with a donor ID, IBEX7A. James searched the ID online. Nothing. No hits, no registry, just a handful of obscure forum posts speculating about extraterrestrial tissue trials and classified organ swaps. Most were dated years ago. Most had been deleted. He clicked on a cached version of one post. It described a secret program where alien biological material was being tested for human compatibility. The author claimed to have worked on a project involving ocular transplants, vision enhancements, they called them. James's heart pounded. He closed the laptop and stared at his reflection in the dark window. His eyes looked normal, but he didn't feel normal. The next morning he saw his supervisor again. And this time the man's face flickered, just for a moment, revealing something beneath the skin. Something not human. James didn't scream, he didn't run. He just nodded, smiled, and went back to work. But inside, something had shifted. He wasn't just recovering from surgery. He was seeing the world through someone, or something, else's eyes. Chapter 3. The Unveiling. James had stopped watching the news. It wasn't just the blur, it was the faces. Every time he tuned in, something twisted in his gut. Politicians, CEOs, military generals, anyone with power, appeared wrong. Their skin shimmered like oil on water. Their eyes pulsed with a faint, unnatural glow. Their mouths moved in sync with the words, but the expressions didn't match. It was like watching a puppet show with invisible strings. He tried to dismiss it as a side effect of the transplant. Maybe his brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the new sensory input. But the distortions were too consistent, too selective. One night he paused mid-scroll on a news site. A story about global trade negotiations featured a photo of several world leaders. James leaned in. The Prime Minister of the UK had elongated pupils. The President of the United States, his skin was mottled, almost translucent. The Secretary General of the UN looked like he was wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. James shut his laptop and paced the room. He felt like he was losing his mind, or seeing something he wasn't supposed to. He remembered the donor ID, IBEX7A. The obscure forum post had mentioned vision enhancements. What if the transplant hadn't just restored his sight? What if it had changed what he could perceive? He dug deeper. Late into the night, he found a buried thread on a dark web archive. It referenced a covert program, Project YBEX, designed to test alien sensory organs in human hosts. The goal, to detect shapeshifters embedded in positions of influence. James's hands trembled. He wasn't hallucinating. He was seeing the truth, and the truth was horrifying. The next morning, he rode to work in silence. His driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. For a moment, the man's face flickered. His jaw elongated, his skin rippled like scales. James looked away. He was surrounded, and only his eyes could see it. Chapter 4. Workplace Shadows. James arrived at the office early, hoping to avoid the morning rush. The building felt colder than usual. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the open floor plan. His co-workers trickled in, offering polite nods and half smiles. But James no longer trusted smiles. He kept his head down, fingers dancing across the keyboard, pretending to code while his eyes scanned the room. His supervisor, Mark, stood near the coffee machine, chatting with one of the co-founders. Their faces shimmered, just slightly, enough to make James's stomach turn. He blinked hard. The shimmer vanished, but the unease remained. Later that morning, James received an email flagged urgent. It was from HR, requesting a private meeting to discuss recent behavioral concerns. His heart raced. Had someone noticed his reactions? Had he said something out loud? In the meeting room, the HR rep, Karen, smiled warmly. Her face looked human. But when she turned to introduce the second person in the room, James froze. It was the company's other co-founder, Alan. And Alan's face was wrong. His skin had a faint iridescence, like fish scales under moonlight. His eyes were too wide, too still. James felt a pressure behind his own eyes, like something inside him was reacting to the presence. "James," Alan said, "we've noticed some inconsistencies in your behavior. Are you feeling well?" James nodded slowly. "Just adjusting to the transplant. Still some visual distortions." Alan leaned forward. "Distortions? What kind?" James hesitated. "Blurring, light sensitivity. Sometimes faces look different." Karen scribbled something in her notebook. Alan didn't blink. "We want to make sure you're not under undue stress," Alan said. "You're a valuable part of the team." James forced a smile. "I appreciate that." As he left the room, he caught a glimpse of Alan's reflection in the glass door. For a split second, the image didn't match the man standing behind him. James walked back to his desk, heart pounding. He opened a blank document and began typing. Not code, but notes. Observations, names, faces, patterns. He was being watched, and not just by co-workers. Something deeper was tracking him, something that knew what he could see. Chapter 5. The Doctor's Office. James sat in the waiting room of the ophthalmology clinic, his hands clenched around a paper cup of water. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like insects. He hadn't slept. Every face he passed on the way here had shimmered, twitched, or glitched, like reality was buffering. Dr. Lanning greeted him with a warm smile. Human. Entirely human. James felt a flicker of relief. "I've been seeing things," James said once the door closed behind them. "Not hallucinations, distortions. People. They look different. Alien." Dr. Lanning frowned. Alien. James hesitated. I think it's the transplant. I think I'm seeing something I wasn't meant to. The doctor leaned forward. James, your corneas came from a classified donor. That's all I know. The tissue was approved through an international exchange. It passed every compatibility test. Was it human? Dr. Lanning didn't answer. Instead, he tapped his tablet and said, "Let me bring in my supervisor. He's more familiar with the donor program." James's pulse quickened. The door opened and a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped in. His name tag read Dr. Jessup. James looked up and froze. Jessup's face was wrong. His skin shimmered faintly, like heat rising off asphalt. His eyes were too large, too still. And when he spoke, his voice had a strange cadence, like it was being translated in real time. "Mr. Horner," Jessup said, "we understand you're experiencing perceptual anomalies. That's not uncommon with advanced ocular grafts." James stood. "I need to go." Dr. Lanning looked confused. "James, wait." But James was already backing toward the door. Jessup's eyes narrowed. "You're seeing what you weren't meant to," he said softly. "That's unfortunate." James bolted. He didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, 2 at a time, heart pounding. Outside, the city felt different, like it was watching him. He didn't know who to trust, but he knew one thing. The donor hadn't been human, and now the ones who gave him sight wanted to take it back. Chapter 6. The FBI Hotline. James didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flickers, faces warping, eyes glowing, skin rippling like liquid metal. The world had become a masquerade, and he was the only one seeing behind the masks. He needed help, real help. Not doctors, not co-workers, not anyone who might already be compromised. At 3:17 a.m., he dialed the FBI's anonymous tip line. He kept his voice low. "I need to report something. It's about infiltration. People in power. They're not who they say they are." The operator asked for details. James gave none. "Just look at the broadcast feeds." "Look closely. You'll see it." He hung up before they could trace the call. Or so he thought. The next morning, 2 men in dark suits arrived at his office. They flashed badges. FBI. "James Horner?" one asked. James nodded slowly. "What's this about?" "We received a report. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Their faces were calm, too calm. Their eyes didn't blink. Their skin shimmered faintly under the office lights. James felt the pressure behind his eyes again, like something inside him was warning him. "I need to step out," he said, backing away. The agents followed. James turned and bolted down the stairwell, skipping steps, heart hammering. He burst out into the alley behind the building, only to find 2 more agents waiting. Alien. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. One raised a device that pulsed with blue light. James collapsed. When he woke, he was in a sterile room with no windows. A camera blinked red in the corner. The door was locked. An alien voice crackled through the intercom. "You've seen too much, Mr. Horner. We need to understand how." James said nothing. He stared into the camera, eyes burning. "I want a lawyer." There was silence. Then the voice returned. "You'll be transferred for evaluation. We'll take good care of you." James knew what that meant. He wasn't being protected. He was being erased. Chapter 7. The Institution. The van smelled like antiseptic and old vinyl. James sat shackled to the bench, wrists cuffed, eyes darting between the 2 agents seated across from him. Neither spoke. Their faces remained blank, unreadable, alien. The drive took nearly an hour. They passed the city limits, then the suburbs, then a stretch of forest that felt deliberately isolating. Finally, the van pulled up to a squat concrete building surrounded by chain-link fencing and floodlights. A sign read, Ridgeview Behavioral Evaluation Center. Inside, everything was white, walls, floors, uniforms. The staff moved with eerie precision, their expressions frozen in polite neutrality. James scanned their faces. Alien. Every one of them. The nurses, the orderlies, the doctors, all shimmering beneath the surface. He was processed, stripped of his belongings, and given a room with no windows. The only humans he saw were the patients, most of them sedated, slumped in wheelchairs or staring blankly at the walls. James kept quiet. He knew the staff were watching. He knew they were waiting for him to crack. On the third day, during a supervised group session, he met Bernard. Bernard was older, wiry, with a sharp gaze that cut through the haze of medication. He leaned close and whispered, "You see them too, don't you?" James froze. "What?" "The aliens. Behind the faces. I saw them once, during a broadcast glitch. I was a network engineer. The feed scrambled, and for 3 seconds every face on screen changed." James's pulse quickened. "You're not crazy." Bernard smiled. "Neither are you." They spoke in fragments over the next few days, careful not to draw attention. Bernard had theories about the donor program, about Project YBEX, about how certain frequencies could reveal the aliens' true forms. "They're embedded," Bernard said, "in government, media, medicine. They control perception. But your eyes are tuned differently." James nodded. "I think my donor was one of them." Bernard's eyes lit up. "Then you're the key." That night, James lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The institution was a prison, but he wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere beneath the layers of sedation and surveillance, a plan was forming. They would escape. They would expose the truth. And they would make the world see what it had been blind to for far too long. Chapter 8. The Breakout. The institution ran on routine. Pills at dawn, group therapy at 10, lights out by 9. But Bernard had been watching, calculating, waiting. On the 7th night, he whispered to James, "Tonight, East Wing, maintenance corridor. I've mapped the blind spots." James nodded. His heart thudded like a countdown. They moved during the medication lull, when the staff assumed compliance. Bernard had stolen a keycard weeks ago, hidden inside a hollowed-out paperback. They slipped past the sedated patients, past the humming security panels, past the nurses whose faces shimmered in the dim light. At the corridor's end, a service hatch led to the boiler room. From there, a crawl space tunneled beneath the building. Bernard had found it during a fire drill. It smelled of rust and mildew, but it led out. They emerged in the woods behind the facility, breathless and soaked in sweat. The floodlights hadn't spotted them. "Not yet." "We need to move," Bernard said. "They'll track us." They hiked through the forest until dawn, avoiding roads, cameras, drones. Bernard had a contact, an old colleague from his broadcast days, a man named Dr. Sato, who had vanished after publishing a paper on perceptual frequency anomalies. They reached a cabin hidden deep in the hills. Inside, a group of scientists huddled around outdated monitors and jury-rigged satellite dishes. They looked human, and they were. "This is the underground," Bernard said. "They know. They've always known." Dr. Saito examined James's eyes with reverence. "IBEX7A, he whispered. "You're the first to survive the transplant. The first to see." James felt the weight of it. He wasn't just a witness. He was a weapon. The scientists had been working on a plan, a way to hijack global communication satellites and broadcast at a frequency that revealed the aliens' true forms. But they lacked a test subject, a proof of concept. Now they had James. and the countdown had begun. Chapter 9. The Signal. The cabin buzzed with quiet intensity. Old monitors flickered, satellite schematics covered the walls, and a dozen scientists worked in hushed coordination. James sat at the center of it all, his eyes scanned, measured, and calibrated. Dr. Saito adjusted a frequency modulator. Your corneas are tuned to a spectrum we've only theorized. Ibex 7. A wasn't just a transplant, it was a lens, a key. Bernard leaned over the console. We can piggyback on the global satellite grid. If we inject the right frequency into the broadcast stream, it'll override visual masking protocols. Everyone will see what you see. James nodded. And once they see, they'll never unsee. The plan was simple in theory, impossible in practice. They needed to access 5 major satellite uplinks, each guarded, each monitored. But the underground had allies, former engineers, rogue technicians, even a few whistleblowers who'd vanished from public life. We go live in 48 hours, Saito said. Once the signal hits, the aliens will know. They'll retaliate. James stared at the screen showing a test feed. A politician's face flickered. Human, then alien, then back again. Let them come. That night, the cabin's perimeter alarms blared, drones overhead, footsteps in the woods. The aliens had found them. Evacuate, Bernard shouted. Get the drives, get the backups. James grabbed the prototype transmitter. It pulsed faintly in his hands, tuned to his vision. Outside, figures moved through the trees, shimmering, shifting, hunting. They escaped through a hidden tunnel beneath the cabin, emerging miles away in an abandoned radio tower. The backup team was already there, rerouting the signal path. We lost the main hub, Saito said, breathless, but the signal's still viable. We launch tomorrow. James looked out at the horizon. The world was asleep, but soon it would awaken, and when it did, it would see everything. Chapter 10. The Broadcast. The abandoned radio tower pulsed with quiet energy. Cables snaked across the floor, monitors flickered with satellite telemetry, and the prototype transmitter, tuned to James's vision, sat at the heart of it all. Dr. Saito adjusted the final parameters. We're synced to the global grid, every major network, every streaming platform, every public screen. Once we trigger the signal, there's no going back. James stood by the console, Bernard at his side. Let's go back, Bernard joked, to a time when aliens weren't impersonating our bosses. James smirked. I barely remember it. Saito handed James a small device. Your eyes are the key. The signal calibrates to your perception. When you activate this, the world sees what you see. James took a breath. Then let's show them. He pressed the button. Across the globe, screens flickered. News anchors paused mid-sentence. Politicians froze at podiums. Celebrities on red carpets turned toward cameras, just as their faces began to shift. The masking protocols failed. The frequency override worked. In Tokyo, a press conference erupted in screams as the Prime Minister's face rippled into something insectoid. In Berlin, a live debate dissolved into chaos as both candidates revealed elongated skulls and glowing eyes. In New York, Times Square screens showed the President of the United States, his human form melting away to reveal a towering, translucent being with fractal skin. People panicked. Others stared in stunned silence. But the truth was undeniable. The world had been infiltrated, and now it was awake. Within hours, protests ignited. Governments scrambled to respond. Alien agents tried to shut down the signal, but it had already been mirrored, copied, spread across encrypted networks. The truth couldn't be unseen. James and Bernard watched from the tower as the world changed. We did it, Bernard whispered. James nodded. They'll come for us. They already did. We beat them to the punch. Above them, satellites blinked like stars. Somewhere in orbit, alien ships began to stir. The Exodus was coming. Chapter 11. Uprising. The world didn't sleep that night. Screens across every continent replayed the broadcast. News anchors tried to explain, then vanished. Governments issued statements, then retracted them. Social media exploded with footage, faces shifting, leaders unraveling, truths long buried surfacing in real time. In Paris, protesters stormed the presidential palace. In São Paulo, military units turned on their commanders. In Nairobi, a crowd surrounded the UN compound, demanding answers. Everywhere, the same chant echoed, "Show us your true face." James and Bernard watched from a safe house deep in the Mojave, surrounded by the last remnants of the underground. The signal had done its job. The veil was torn. "They're scrambling," Bernard said, scanning intercepted transmissions. "Evac protocols. Orbital extraction. They're leaving." James stared at the feed. Alien ships, sleek, silent, emerged from cloaked positions in Earth's orbit. Some launched from hidden bases beneath oceans, deserts, even major cities. The mass departure had begun. But not all aliens fled. Some resisted. Some tried to reassert control. Skirmishes broke out, brief, brutal, and futile. Humanity had seen the truth. And once seen, it could not be unseen. In Washington, the Capitol burned. In Beijing, the skies lit up with anti-orbital fire. In London, citizens marched with signs reading, "We are not blind anymore." James felt no triumph, only clarity. "They'll rewrite this," Bernard said. "Erase us. Say it was a glitch, a hoax, a mass hallucination." James nodded. "Let them. We didn't do it for credit." Bernard smiled. "We did it for sight." Outside, the desert wind howled. Above them, the stars blinked, clearer now than ever before. The world was free, and no one knew their names. But James didn't care. He had seen the truth, and now so had everyone else. Chapter 12. A New Silence. The world had changed, but it hadn't healed. In the weeks following the broadcast, cities pulsed with unrest. Governments collapsed. Emergency councils formed. Alien collaborators were hunted, interrogated, exiled. Some vanished before they could be found, fleeing into the shadows or slipping aboard the last of the ships that left Earth's orbit. James and Bernard stayed hidden. They moved from safe house to safe house, watching the world rebuild itself in fragments. The underground dissolved into scattered cells, each with its own mission: truth archives, resistance memoirs, counter-surveillance. But James didn't join them. He couldn't. His eyes still saw too much. Even after the broadcast, even after the uprising, the shimmer remained. Not in everyone, but in some. A few faces still flickered. A few voices still carried that strange cadence. The aliens hadn't all left. Some had stayed, adapted, hidden deeper. Bernard noticed it too. "They're evolving," he said one night, "learning how to mask even from you." James nodded. "Then I'll keep watching." Years passed. James Horner lived quietly on the edge of a coastal town, his name forgotten, his story erased. He kept no photos, no records, only a journal filled with sketches and sightings, faces that shimmered, voices that glitched, patterns that didn't belong. Bernard had gone north, chasing signals in the aurora. They spoke rarely, but when they did, it was always in code, always with urgency. One evening, James stood on the shoreline, watching the tide roll in. A child approached, holding a cracked tablet. "My mom says you helped save the world." James smiled. "Your mom's very kind. She says you see things other people can't." James knelt beside her. Sometimes seeing isn't the hard part. It's believing. She nodded, then pointed to the horizon. Do you think they'll come back? James looked out at the stars. One blinked, too steady, too deliberate. If they do, we'll be ready. The child ran off, her laughter echoing across the sand. James remained, eyes fixed on the sky, journal tucked under his arm. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a prophet. He was a witness. And he was still watching. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.